hello. Welcome back to the Connected Wellness Podcast. I'm Rachel Ann. I'm here with Marianne and another special guest, and we are so passionate about wellness.
Here in this podcast, we look at the ways our physical, emotional, and spiritual health is all connected and how we can take better care of our whole selves holistically so we can live our best lives. We're really excited that you're here with us on the journey. Welcome to episode 44 of the podcast. And
It's here,
welcome to
44.
Jonathan, our special guest today that we're
Yes.
really excited to have.
Hi,
Um,
Jonathan.
Let me tell you about Jonathan, and then you'll hopefully understand our topic for today, right? Why we have Jonathan here with us. So, I've known Jonathan like most of my life, which is really exciting. So, he's kind of been like my little brother for most of my life. We grew up together in church, but Jonathan is an Ohio native. He finished his undergrad studies in biology at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. And then he went to medical school at the Lewis Katz School of Medicine at Temple University in Philadelphia. And then after medical school, he completed residency in internal medicine at Cleveland Clinic, and then a chief residency in Cleveland, Ohio, and then Weston, Florida. And then he finished gastroenterology and hepatology fellowship at Cleveland Clinic, Florida, where he developed an interest in general gastroenterology and therapy for obesity. Now he lives with his brand new wife post honeymoon, we were just talking about before the recording, in Orlando, and he enjoys cooking without a recipe. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. So welcome, Jonathan. Dr. Ragheb, it's so nice to have you and to see you.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. Really a pleasure to be here, and I'm really grateful for having this kind of podcast as a means to talk about wellness and all its facets, and especially one that I really love, which is the gut.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we wanted to talk about gut health. And as Jonathan is my favorite gastroenterologist, I was like, we need to have him on the show. Maybe the only gastroenterologist I know well, but that's okay. You're still my favorite. Absolutely my favorite.
It's
But
okay.
you guys, gut health is like everywhere. It's kind of one of those wellness buzzwords now. And if you're on
Yeah.
Instagram or on social media, all these people have a lot of things to say about gut health, and I thought it was about time we like had a informed discussion about it, right? What's
Yeah.
real? What do we actually need to pay attention to? Because it kind of affects everything, right?
No,
Yeah.
it's tied to the brain, to some links to heart disease, actually, to basically how people feel on a day-to-day basis. Encompasses most of the body from here down. So, there's a lot going on with the gut, and I agree, definitely really important to address and to think about, especially in the era of, probiotics, liver detoxes,
Hmm.
colorectal screening. How does that play into all of this? So, a lot of different and new exciting changes in gastroenterology and the gut health.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm excited
Cool.
to dive in. Yeah.
Yeah.
But before we do, we must discuss our wellness wins.
Yes,
So, who's gonna start us off? Who's really excited about their win?
I could do it.
Yay, Jonathan,
Go
what do
for
you
Yeah.
got?
it.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I really like cooking without a recipe. And so one of the wins I had was just 2 days ago. Was able to cook dinner with my wife. It's fun because, unlike most critics of my cooking, she actually is open-minded, and so is okay with burnt food and things that don't taste very good. So it was very nice to cook with her, and then at the end of the day, we sit down together and we enjoy the meal that we made. It turned out okay, it's edible. But it was just nice to spend time and to create
Yeah,
things together.
I love it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet. There is some food that tastes better burnt. I will
Yes.
say that. Like
Well,
the
introduce me.
yeah, like burnt rice. I know in Caribbean culture that's like a really big thing and it tastes like
Hmm.
delicious. So like the bottom of the pan will be burnt and like those are like the pieces that you really want cuz the
Mhm.
burnt gives it flavor and like this really cool texture. So in your
Hmm.
defense, you're really just like so top notch in your cooking skills and the rest of the world
Like,
needs to catch up.
it's really exotic, yeah. definitely.
Well, I'm kind of curious why they're without a recipe part. Is it because like so much of our lives are like structured and especially
Mm,
like in medicine too, like
that's a good
formulaic
question.
and whatever.
Yeah.
And is that like your chance to be openly creative and not have constraints or what?
Yeah, just trying to break the mold. It's exactly as you said. Uh, medicine is very textbook, right? You've got this diagnosis, you've got this treatment for it, uh, and there are some nuances in actual practice, of course, but a chance to really go off the script is not there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really nice to just come home at the end of the day and to have at it. Not really sure where you're going to end up
Yeah.
at this and that, and maybe it comes out good, maybe it comes out great, or usually just comes out okay. But at least you've given it a try and you got
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
experience something new.
I like it.
Mm.
Yeah. I'm a very much a recipe person and then I'll make modifications. So I don't know, you're kind of encouraging me to want to try to just like
Yeah,
you know just
yeah,
open the fridge, the pantry, what do I got, and start from there. That'll be fun. Yeah.
yeah. Start with a smoothie. That's very easy. It's
uh
hard to mess up.
Mm.
Whatever you put in is probably going to be good. And
yeah,
then once you get the momentum, go from there.
build it from there. I like it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's a good
thanks.
point.
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
Hmm.
very good.
Very
What do you got,
nice.
Rachel?
Um, so was my win last time the library, or am I making that up? Do you remember?
No, it was that you moved
It was
successfully.
that I moved.
Oh,
Yes. Thank you, Marianne, for
Remember?
having really great memory. Yes. So that is still an awesome wellness one that we are enjoying.
Uh-oh.
So the wellness one though for this time around is that I got a library card, and it is just so
Is
exciting.
anyone there?
And with the library card, you have access to the library. You can get books, yay! And this is the first time I got a library card in New York City. And so I go to the library, I get my books, and there was one that I really wanted. It wasn't out yet. And so I had to, put it on hold, all of that fun stuff. And then I got it, and I got another one, and I finished that book, and it was a really great book. So I went back and I returned it, and I got another one. And I was like, this is so cool. So my wellness win is that libraries are the coolest thing ever. And I feel like a kid again. And also that I'm like reading more. I've never been anti-reading, but I've never been that person. Like I'm not on Marianne's level where I'm like I'm always reading something. I have a whole yep. I love that for you. I would not have that sticker. So this is very new for me to explore like a different genre of books. And then Marianne gave me some really good recommendations, one of which finally came in yesterday. So my wellness win is that I'm engaging in my intellectual wellness. Shout out to people who were a part of that episode and listened to it. I'm engaging in my intellectual wellness with reading, and it's been a really cool ride.
awesome.
That makes me very
Yes,
happy. Yes, I love
I
that.
had a hunch.
Yeah,
I was like, Meredith is going to be very happy that I am asking her for book recommendations and they're coming in, and yeah. Oh, how about you, Marianne? What's your wellness one?
Mine is actually related. So as much as I
Ah.
love books, and it's usually for me a paper physical book. I've never
Mhm.
been an ebook reader or an audiobook reader, but I recently got into audiobooks. And it's just been another way to
Oh.
engage in literature that I clearly love. And I've been listening to them on my commute to work. And that's made it like, honestly, I'm like excited to go to work because I get to continue listening to my book, which has been kind of unusual because one campus I work at is a little further away, and I'm always like, ugh, I have to drive all the way out there today. But then I'm like, ooh, more time for my book. So it's been a
Mm.
little bit of a shift of perspective. But I finished one. People have probably read it or seen the movie where the crawdads sing. It was
Mm.
fantastic on audio. And then I'm on to my second one now. So I'm excited. Yeah, that like for years I was resistant. I was like, nope, reading for me is paper in my hand. But this is just another way to consume more literature, and that makes me happy. Yeah.
Mm. Oh,
awesome.
that's awesome. I'm curious to hear how that goes because I'm very similar. I can't really do audiobooks like that. I can't really do ebooks like that.
Yeah.
So maybe there's like something that you have learned that has allowed you to be able to do that. So I'm excited to be updated on that journey.
Thank you. Thank you. Yay,
Yeah, it's
wellness
great.
wins. So I feel like all of ours are like kind of intellectual, creative, but yours is
Hmm.
also relational, Jonathan, being able to sit down with your wife who doesn't
Yeah.
criticize your burnt food, which is nice. God bless her for that. May that continue for many, many years. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, yes, definitely grateful for that.
Okay, well, good job, guys. Yay, wellness wins. So now let's get into this. Okay, so
Mm.
we were saying gut health is like almost a trendy wellness topic, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
like you were saying, Jonathan, probiotics and cleanses and detoxes and all these things. Like, what is real? What is just a part of the wellness industry trying to take our money? I have a hunch a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these detoxes and cleanses are not actually doing anything. So I don't know. Why don't you just start us off with kind of like what are some things that you've heard that you're as a doctor, you're like, ugh, please no,
Sure.
Mm.
yeah, that you want to correct.
Yeah, I think maybe the first part to start with is what is the gut?
Mm.
A lot of people don't know that perhaps the liver is involved. So we've got, the
Oh.
esophagus, the stomach, the colon, the small intestines. That's what most people think about when they think about the gut. But
Yeah.
there's really a complex interplay also of the liver, the pancreas, the gallbladder,
Mm.
and when any one of these things goes wrong, they spill over into other organ dysfunction as well. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about gut. And when we're talking
Mm.
about, what are those, fads and myths that maybe people are passing off as truth, one of the things that comes to mind is actually stool testing for their microbiome.
Mm.
So
Mm.
a lot of patients will come to us with this really, expansive search of their stool sample, different types of bacteria you've never heard of, and they come to you and they say, "Oh, doctor, I've got yeast in my bowels, in my gut. That seems like a bad thing. Am I infected? Is this the cause of my inflammation?" And
Mm.
the truth of the matter is that we actually need a lot of bacteria and yeast to ferment our foods and to help process them, break them down for us so that we can absorb the nutrients from those byproducts. So I would say number one, it's okay to have yeast and bacteria in your gut. In fact, it's encouraged.
Mm.
I think
Mm.
what happens, when it comes to talking about inflammation and disease states, I remember Dr. A was on one of the previous episodes. We're talking more about an imbalance of
Mm.
the bacterial profile or the yeast profile, the microbiome of the gut, which is all life in the gut.
Mm.
That's when we start getting into those inflammation and disease states that he was referring to. And so I think number one, you don't need to invest any money in those stool sample tests, at least not yet, because we really don't have an understanding of which bacteria, which yeast are the most problematic. They'll come with some papers that show, oh, I have a 99% level of this particular bacteria. But I think as we've been learning just about wellness in general, being interconnected spiritually, mentally, bodily, there's it's not just one thing that drives all the dysfunction in the others, right? It's
Mm.
Yeah.
sort of a comprehensive thing, and I think the same thing is true of the way bacteria and yeast interplay together. It's likely not going to be just one organism. It's going to
Mm.
be the imbalance between them. So I wouldn't get too worried if you do one of those things. If you've already done it in the past and you find this result's abnormal, it's probably okay. It's still worth talking to if you'd like, but um, we tend to reassure people more than put them at more angst, simply
Yeah.
because there's not much to act on, and it's actually reassuring that you have a good diversity.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And isn't it true that like everybody's is so different, everybody's microbiome, that like you can't say like,
Mm.
okay, because you have more of this and less of that, that's necessarily bad. Everyone is just so different. It's based on our environment and what we eat and right? Like, there's so much that goes into it.
It's absolutely correct. Some bacteria is more associated with patients who have a larger body habitus or body shape. Some who have a thinner one have a completely different bacterial profile. And for some time, people are trying to figure out weight loss regimens to use these bacteria, and transplant them into this person. Those studies really didn't pan out into much. But what we did learn from studies similar are things like fecal transplants, where some
Mm.
people have an abnormal amount of bacteria which is known to be toxic, like something called Clostridium difficile or C. diff. It's a really severe diarrheal infection. People sometimes end up in the hospital, and treating it, people feel night and day difference once it's been treated. So actually, people who keep having recurrence of this do get something called a fecal transplant, where we do take a sample of bacteria from a normal stool, and we put it into the colon of someone who's been having these episodes of severe diarrheal infection, and it has decreased recurrence. So in some respects, there is some truth to the fact that we can take bacteria from here and put them here and make someone feel a bit better. But by and large, the circumstances by which we can do that are not that many, and if there are some beyond these simple infectious treatments for severe infections, has really not been well studied in any trials of a large scale.
Wow.
But very good question.
Yeah. Marion, how are you doing? Because we're talking lots of gross words, which I know.
Yeah. Well, the first time I heard about this fecal transplant idea, and there's also, if I'm not mistaken, like pills,
Yeah.
I was like, what? Yeah, so I'm a little bit over the grossness of it.
Okay.
I
Good.
mean, not over it, but you know what I mean. It's not a shock because I've heard of it before, and it's I mean, it's
Okay.
really fascinating. I find the whole thing unbelievably fascinating and amazing that you can, guys, it's basically using someone's poop to heal someone else. I mean, that's
Yeah.
like incredible. Like, it's
Yeah.
gross, but it's amazing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
The truest form of recycling, I think.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, very sustainable practice, eco-friendly,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Rachel,
Yeah.
for your concern.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just do a quick check in. If y'all don't know, Marianne, is not a fan of things of less lovely nature, like
Yeah.
poop and all of that. But I'm happy we're here and we're rolling. Something that I have heard a lot about that you're starting to talk about is the probiotics. Sorry, my throat, is with probiotics. And specifically with probiotics, I hear like some people love it. Some people, it's like, it did nothing for me. There's also so many different types of probiotics. Like they're like, this has 3 billion something, something. And then other ones are like, this has 10 billion bacteria, something, something. And that seems a little bit terrifying. There's some just for women. There's some just for men. So I would love to hear your thoughts about probiotics and like, what are they? Are there instances when they are helpful, and which ones should we go with and not go with?
Sure. No, definitely probiotics is very exciting because as a field, it's bound to become something very natural, very in tune with what people are after. A lot of folks don't want anything to do with pharmaceutical substances, any chemicals, preservatives, and things like that. So definitely, it speaks to people who are trying to find natural means of healing. That being said, you may get mixed results because of what we just talked about, the microbiome or gut diversity of bacteria. So it may be that one probiotic works for you, but not for your friend, simply because you have, a deficiency in the bacterial balance that is provided in the probiotic. But probiotics as a whole are very complicated in that they can actually be separated into prebiotics and postbiotics. Uh, Probiotics is sort of a umbrella term to cover any type of bacterial related substance that we're going to ingest with the intention of healing. And prebiotics refers to mainly that bacterial culture or yeast culture, or whatever it may be, that organism that we're taking in with the hopes of using its fermentation and byproducts for our benefit. And then postbiotics is actually just the byproduct itself. So they've already had yeast or bacteria grown or cultured somewhere. They've produced some substance which is useful to us, and they've packaged that so that we can take that. So there's prebiotics and postbiotics, and then this overall term of probiotics. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, so definitely there is a lot of opportunity for financial gain here. I won't lie to you.
Yeah.
A lot of people are coming up with any number of strains of bacteria, packaging them, and then selling them as, improving gut health or um, number one customer satisfied probiotic. Um, as we said before, it will really depend on your biodiversity. So what I usually recommend to folks is that you only try it for about 30 days. Because by that time you should have had enough time to reestablish a balance of the gut profile. And if a probiotic is truly meant to work for you, it'll work in that time. There are some studies that study probiotics for up to 6 months, but to me, that's not really cost effective. And those results in those trials, especially one was a probiotic designed for weight loss, ended up losing about 2 pounds at the 6 month mark. So it seems like a lot of investment up front to lose 2 pounds over that period. So I would say most of these probiotics, we use them for just a month at a time, see if they work. And they work for different things. So there's actually an amazing guide put together online. It's called the US Probiotic Guide. So I welcome a lot of people to review it. And this is probably one of the biggest collections of evidence-based studies to support various probiotics that you might see in the store. So you might see things like Align in the store, Flora Store, Culturelle, Visibiome. All of these have some studies, albeit they're small studies, but they're studies nonetheless. So have been peer reviewed, have had some scientific rigor or thought behind them. And so I encourage everyone to look at that type of guide and to really figure out, is this probiotic right for me or for you? Simply because there are some that are really good for constipation, some that are really good for irritable bowel syndrome or IBS, some that have been used for weight loss, so there's a lot of different indications for these probiotics, but this guide really helps to stratify them. As far as what to look for in a probiotic, there are certain strains that we know do very well. So I think lactobacillus, which you'll find many variations of that because there are different subspecies, and so lactobacillus rhamnosus, for example, is one of the more prominent ones. Saccharomyces, which is usually available in Flora Store, is like it's not quite a bacteria, it's more along the yeast side. So you're actually ingesting yeast. For those people who are worried about yeast in the gut, you actually want some. And then you also have something like bifidobacterium. Those are probably the top three species that we have evidence for. And the question is why and when and how do we use them? So as a preventative measure, there's really not much evidence to say you will live longer, you will feel better if you take it as a normal, healthy person who doesn't have any symptoms to begin with. So I wouldn't encourage that as a preventative thing. Now, if you have some symptom you're trying to alleviate, whether it be chronic fatigue, whether bloating, constipation, diarrhea, that's a different story. You may get some benefit from it. There's also a lot of things we can do with the diet and with hydration that may help you even more, and not just with your gut, but with respect to other organs as well. But certainly the most evidence-based indications for probiotics will be antibiotic-associated diarrhea, traveler's diarrhea. So if you are someone who every time you take an antibiotic for a cold or if you have pneumonia, God forbid, some infection, and you take antibiotics, major side effect of most antibiotics is going to be nausea, diarrhea, plus or minus abdominal cramping. So it's okay to actually take probiotics in that case because the antibiotic, it may kill bacteria indiscriminately, right? And so by taking that probiotic at the same time, you're sort of replenishing the system while it's selectively targeting, that is the antibiotic, those bacteria that are pathogenic or are toxic. That's one good indication. Another is people who are traveling a lot, they're eating local cuisine that's very different from, whether it's Caribbean burnt rice or something else. They can take that so that they don't experience as much GI distress on the plane there, on the plane back, through their stay while they're ingesting some local cuisine. I think those are pretty good indications. There are some other ones, but they're a bit more subspecialized to patients with inflammatory bowel disease.
Wow.
Yeah.
I am blown away. One, I am that person that always gets sick whenever they eat local cuisine. And I'm just like, this is my life now. I really want to try this. We're going to just suck it up and we're just going to pray really hard. So I don't have to do that anymore. That's really nice. And two, I do take probiotics for, I think I've shared on the podcast, I have IBS, and that's been just like a fun journey to figure out. And my nutritionist, she was like, you should try probiotics. And I was like, are you trying to scam me? And she's like, I would not do that to you. And I was like, you better not. And she led me in the direction of a really great probiotic. And I found one that was a really good fit for me. And then that one ran out. So I had to get another one real quick. I was like, I'll just get any regular one. No, my body was like, no,
Same.
girl, we only do this one. So I said, okay, fine. So I make sure now to have that specific one stocked up. So I say all that to say, to your point about the individuality that we have of our microbiome and our bodies, and with really anything else as humans, there's specific things that work for us and there's specific things that do not work for us. So
Hmm.
I'm happy to hear that there's a guide in a form of like legitimacy that can kind of help us figure out which direction to go in, depending on what it is that we're working on. We need to work on, so we know which probiotic to get. So that guide, I'll look it up and I'll link it below because I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think Jonathan, you shared the link with us.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, so we'll definitely share it because that sounds super helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's a pretty large list, so it may still need some guidance as to what to pick or for what reason. But at least it gives someone an opportunity to be educated if
Yeah.
they choose to be. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. But I like
awesome.
that. Try it for 30 days. That's
Mm-hmm.
helpful, you know. And then if either it works or it doesn't, and if it doesn't, that's okay. It doesn't mean you don't need one. It just means, like you said, you need a different kind because we're all so different. So I want to go back. I thought it was interesting you brought up the stool sample test for the microbiome, which I could never do just because it is gross. But so speaking of other tests that may or may not be a waste of money, one I keep hearing about too is like the food sensitivity tests.
Mm,
Is there any validity to that? I mean, I know that, or I think I know that the only way to really determine sensitivities is with like a elimination diet, which sounds like so extreme. And, every time I'm like, should I see, I'm like, this is just like too much work, you know? So is the food sensitivity testing valid? Do you know what I'm talking about, you guys? There's those kits you can
mm-hmm.
buy. I don't know if it's like a cheek swab or something that you send in, and
Mm-hmm.
then they're
A
like, yeah,
hair
yeah,
sometimes.
you're
Mm-hmm.
sensitive to gluten or lactose or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think to answer, you kind of go to the basics. So, in addition to the gut being a place to absorb nutrients and to digest, it's actually part of your immune system. There's a lot of what we call immunoglobulins or proteins that target um, things that can cause allergies or things that cause infection, and it responds to those things with defense proteins as part of the immune system. So it's not uncommon to hear people talk to us about food sensitivity. And I think what's probably most important when people talk to us is to figure out what are their symptoms before we jump to food sensitivity. Because it may be that there's an enzyme deficiency causing these symptoms. It may be something like a gluten sensitivity, which is actually not related to celiac disease. Um, there's a whole host of things that can cause bloating, gas, and cramping. So I think it's important to, when you come to any professional, to really just start with those things. This is what I have. And then you can add to that, this is what I'm concerned about. So when it comes to food sensitivities, um, we do know that people who have what we call eosinophilic diseases or sort of allergic diseases do have food sensitivities. These are people who, for whatever reason, are very sensitive to food triggers, and their immune system through the gut responds with a higher than expected effect or higher than expected response to dairy or wheat, and then that causes things like thickening of the gut, scar tissue, maybe abnormal movement of the gut. That's the term called the eosinophilic enteritis or enteritis. That is inflammation of the small bowel. So in that particular scenario, we know that skin testing for food allergies doesn't really help. Food testing, um, sensitivity testing sometimes helps when it's not done through those commercial packets. It's sort of a medical or professional grade test. But outside of those conditions, by and large, for people who are just trying to improve their gut health, the food sensitivity tests may not be as helpful. The reason being, one, you pay some money up front to get results about a test that may tell you you're allergic to shrimp, but you eat shrimp pretty regularly. right? So there's some discord between the tissue or the mucus samples, then the defense proteins, the immunoglobulins, how they respond to that shrimp or whatever food it may be, and how your body actually as a whole reacts to it. So there's some discrepancy between saliva or mucus reactivity to different foods as versus that of the whole body. So sometimes that discrepancy leaves people in a weird state. Oh, it says I'm allergic to watermelon, but I eat watermelon. What should I do? Is it bad for me? Am I going to hurt myself by doing this more? So it ends up creating more anxiety and doesn't really lead to any improvement in symptoms should these people eliminate their diet.
Mm-hmm.
I would
Yeah.
recommend elimination diets over food sensitivity. One, it's cheaper. You just stop eating what you're worried about. Two, it can be a little bit harder though. Sometimes, depending on what you're trying to eliminate, you may be surprised that this food was processed in a plant with this other food, and then it becomes harder for you as a person to like put in the work and say, oh, I really need to find something that is free of all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that most issues for people who are concerned about food sensitivity will really center around things like dairy, lactose deficiency. Lactase deficiency is a huge problem that we start to see, especially as people age, primarily in for the Hispanic, sometimes Asian populations. They may start out tolerating dairy as a child, and then as they age 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, they just tolerate that less and less, and they get more symptoms from it. A second thing people have always asked us about is gluten sensitivity. People are worried that gluten sensitivity causes brain fog and confusion and cramping and headaches. And, it's important to remember that actually gluten sensitivity, which is not related to celiac disease, which is the primary disease for gluten intolerance, is a diagnosis of exclusion. So uh, actually less than 2% of the people in the world have celiac disease, which is the whole driving force behind the gluten-free diet. So patients with celiac disease will have changes to the wall of the intestine that cause malabsorption, that then cause diarrhea or constipation, that also leave them vitamin deficient. They can lose weight. It's a very severe disease, also linked to other autoimmune diseases, thyroid disorder, diabetes, right? So the gluten-free diet really helps in those patients because that gluten is believed to be, not really an allergy, but a similar allergic trigger to the linings of the wall of the intestine.
Mm-hmm.
And just by eliminating that trigger, you start to get healing of the wall. So that's where we see the most impact of a gluten-free diet. And those people who don't have celiac disease, there's actually no uh, changes to the wall of the intestine. But there is thought to perhaps be maybe an alteration in perception or a change in the movement of the gut. And that's why some folks have started looking into something called non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So patients who suffer from that or think they suffer from that may benefit from excluding things like wheat, oat, rye, barley-based products. So for us, that's breads, rice, different brown pastas. Beer has oats, for example. So there are certain things that you may shy away from and see if that helps you, intestinally speaking. And this is also not necessarily true for just one population. Sometimes people can eat those same things in other countries and they don't feel quite the same effects. So I would say, if you're trying to think about what am I sensitive to, top few things will be dairy, uh, wheat, seafood. Some people have difficulty with eggs and nuts. That's part of the algorithm for treating eosinophilic esophagitis by diet alone. There are some conditions we can treat by diet alone, um, but because they're so hard and strict, as you said before, it's hard to abide by them. So at least I would look at those food groups and try to eliminate them or minimize intake and see if that helps, if food sensitivity is truly a concern for you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow, that is really helpful. I feel like the elimination diet is the best way to go about it, but definitely the most stressful. But I feel like working with like you or some type of practitioner can kind of give direction on like how to go about it and
Hmm.
to make it less stressful. Do you think that is helpful?
Definitely, definitely. I think
Okay.
pairing yourself with a gastroenterologist, or in this case, probably better suited as a nutritionist, you can
Mm,
create a elimination diet plan. And we may start by saying, eliminate this for 2 weeks from your diet, just this one item, instead of trying to eliminate everything, because it is
mm,
really hard. Um, there are a lot of folks who do have difficulty with digesting certain sugars, and some of those sugars can also trigger things like irritable bowel syndrome. And we
mm,
ask people to go on something called a low FODMAP diet, which is FODMAP being fermentable oligo, di and polysaccharides, sorry, monosaccharides and polyols. So it's a very long term to say that there are some complex sugars and alcohol variants in foods that may make symptoms worse for people, bloating, cramping, and such. And so we sometimes ask people to go on a low FODMAP diet, but this diet is very restrictive. You're cutting out, well, especially as Egyptians, you're cutting out like a large amount of, and Hispanics as well. They lose most of the beans, the onions, any kind of garlics or leeks that they may use, lentils. That's like a whole, grouping of food that's core to these cultures. And so, not surprisingly, they also cause a lot of these bloatings and GI distress. Um, so removing all of these things at once can really be difficult. So
Mm.
mm,
we ask people just to do 2 weeks at a time, remove one food group, and see if that can, at least result in some benefit for you.
Yeah.
mm,
So both of you mentioned stress and or anxiety in parts of your, I know, Jonathan, you said the test could say I have this sensitivity and that could cause me to be anxious. So stress and anxiety clearly play a huge role in our digestive system and how we feel. So I always find it difficult to tell, am I having some digestive symptoms because I'm stressed and anxious, or because something is wrong and I need to address it, So how can we, I know it's not an easy answer and probably takes a doctor, but is there a kind of a good way to tell, like, maybe I'm just stressed right now,
mm,
or maybe I need to make an appointment?
Yeah. No, you're spot on. Stress plays a huge role in how people feel with GI symptoms. Uh, Analogously, if you can think, if you have someone that you love and you're around them and you get butterflies in your stomach, right? You feel some kind of cramping or nausea, right? Or you're before the moments of a test.
Hmm.
You may see this a lot, Marion, and your students. Before a test, people clench their fists there and they get a little bit anxious. They feel something in their gut, right? This is not, some strange phenomenon. There is some link between the gut and the brain, and so it is not uncommon that just like these emotions manifest as these symptoms for people taking tests or people about to go on a flight, that these also affect people who are having some significant life stressors, whether it be relational, financial, a change in how they live, and then it starts to manifest as GI symptoms. Um, and so there is definitely a clear pattern between stress, anxiety, the brain as a whole, and the gut. And some of the ways that we try to figure out what's what is about trending the types of symptoms and uh, when they happen. So if you find that, for example, your symptoms get better on the weekends, or when you're out with friends, you don't feel them as much. It may be that you're actually relieved to be in those situations, and so you're not
mm,
getting that sort of feedback as sort of GI distress. Um, Sometimes we notice too that when there's not a consistent pattern, people will come to us and say, you know what, I'm not sure what food it is, but I think something is causing me, a problem. We'll ask them to make a food diary. So on a
mm,
daily basis, list out what you've eaten that day and then how you feel during the times that you've eaten it. And using those two, we try to figure out, is it a food that's consistently creating this problem every day of the week? Or is it actually associated with a mood? And there's some apps to help with that too. There's no specific ones that I really endorse. I was having some patients use one called Caracare for a while because it helps people trend how did they sleep. People put in, I had chicken Alfredo, for example, and it breaks down their um, substances. So there's milk in the Alfredo, there's cheese, there's this much chicken, there's pepper, there's so on and so forth. So it breaks down the components of each food, and by breaking down the components, identifying your mood and your sleep patterns, you kind of figure out, is this something more related to how I'm feeling stress wise, anxiety wise, or is this actually something that maybe food trigger wise, or maybe none of the above, So I think really being on top of how your symptoms are progressing over time and what are the things you're feeling at the time is the best way to make that separation. Um, Not excluding tests. We're doctors, right? We like to test out the wazoo, make sure that beyond the shadow of a doubt that there is nothing else causing this. And so it's also
Hmm.
reasonable to see somebody if these symptoms have been persisting for more than 2 to 4 weeks.
Hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the timing is interesting. I will tell
Hmm.
you, I have, some of these issues, and Chris, my husband, will notice, like when we're on vacation, he's like, "You feel fine, huh?" So yeah, because I'm always like, "Do I need to go to the doctor?" Whatever. And so that's a really good point. And I would love to know that app, because these are things that I've tried to do, like on paper, because I'm an old
Hmm.
school person, and that's hard if you're trying to track all of these patterns, sleep, mood, food.
Hmm.
As a woman, I try to do cycle as well, because I know the
Hmm.
hormones are different parts of my cycle. So I would love to know what that is, and maybe we can share that app. Because if something or someone can do that automatically for me, that sounds like it would be less stressful. And stress is
Yep.
clearly already a part of this, right? I will abandon this log a few days in, because it's just like too many things that I'm trying to pay attention
Hmm.
to.
Yeah.
Hmm.
No,
Yeah,
definitely I can share the names of a few and get those into the show notes.
that's awesome. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, no problem.
So, just for the sake of time, Rachel, any last minute like burning questions that we didn't get a chance to ask Jonathan?
Um, Honestly, you answered all my burning questions. Marion, any burning on your end?
I think there's too many that we'll need maybe a part two, but maybe a
Mm,
takeaway would be like,
mm,
what, so let's say we're just an average person, maybe not any major issues, thank God, or just minor ones. What would be the one or two recommendations to improve our gut health?
Can I make it 4 or 5 or 6? Uh,
Sure. Whatever you're the doctor
no,
here. You're the expert. Yes.
honestly, probably 40% of the problems that we take care of could be fixed with good hydration.
Mm.
So taking at least
mm,
6 to 8 glasses of water or some other fluid a day, not
Hmm.
alcohol, not
No
tea,
alcohol in here.
sorry,
No.
not coffee, sorry, tea or water
Yeah.
or fluids of any kind, because that helps, not only with cellular function, 60% of the body plus is water, but
mm,
also helps with, passing, the food easily through the gut.
Hmm.
I think second thing is to eat adequate amounts of fiber, which we don't get in a Western diet. Only
mm,
about 5% or less people will get normal amounts of fiber, which is around 33 to 25 to 33 grams, depending on if you're a man or a woman, in a day. And so that means eating lots of fruits and vegetables with the peel, eating whole wheat products, bran, um, taking some kind of fiber supplement if you must, because that helps lower cholesterol. It helps slow digestion because it's harder to digest, so people feel full without overeating, but they also end up, getting less cholesterol absorbed. Um, it's easier to pass stool. So lots of benefits to water, to fiber. And then if I'm just going to make a plug for healthy diets, Mediterranean diet is a great diet.
Hmm.
Helps with liver health because we're trying to reduce fatty liver, which is a huge problem in the U.S. And then also things like avoiding processed foods. If you feel some kind of symptoms from them, avoiding artificial sweeteners that can cause diarrhea.
Hmm.
And last but not least, make sure to get colorectal cancer screening at 45. It has to be some form. Doesn't matter if it's a stool test, if it's a colonoscopy, but you got to get something, please, because this is a disease that is entirely treatable if we get to it fast enough.
Mhm.
And so I would leave you with just those takeaways.
Those are very good
Oh,
and reasonable takeaways. Yeah. And in
yeah.
that case, I may choose the stool test over the colonoscopy if you have to choose what's, less upsetting, but I have a few years till I have to worry about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
As,
Um,
as long as it's on mind, that's all.
yeah, I want to say about the eating more fruits and vegetables. I did hear
Mm,
this is a challenge for everyone, only if it's not going to stress you out. I heard this from another gut health specialist that recommended the hydration was number one as well, and number two was increasing plant-based foods in your diet, like you said. And they said if you can eat 30 different plant-based foods within your week, like having that variety, because variety is really good for the microbiome, right? Because
mm,
different bacteria need different kind of to be fed by different things. And I thought it sounded crazy, 30 different plant foods. But so for the one week I like kept track. I clearly like to make lists and so I was like, I'm gonna just see, like, am I anywhere near this 30? And I actually made it without trying terribly hard. Because this includes like fruits,
wow.
vegetables, beans, seeds, herbs,
Uh,
grains, all of these different things. And so even just having that in my mind, like one day I think I added sunflower seeds to my salad, so just to have like
mm,
something extra, maybe I bought radishes when I don't usually throw them in my salad, or, ooh, I'm gonna put some blueberries on my breakfast today, so just having that in mind to just how can you increase your intake of plant-based foods. I thought it was a fun challenge. If anyone else, now in the summer when we have great produce, it's a good time, to try
mm,
that. Talk about a smoothie you mentioned earlier, Jonathan. Way to
Mhm.
get in a whole bunch of different produce, right?
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, yeah. If you
definitely,
agree
definitely
with that
encourage that.
challenge, sorry, say that again.
Yeah, no, I definitely encourage that. One caveat I would say is that uh, you may exclude some things if you end up cooking them. If you heat them for too long, they lose some of the
oh,
nutritional
Mm-hmm.
content or the fiber content. So I would say that that's an excellent challenge, and make sure you apply that mainly to things that are fresh or raw.
Mm-hmm.
mm,
I like it. Except, how about beans though? Cooked beans, okay? Fi
Yeah, beans are okay, but anytime you heat something, it loses its
Still.
fiber
Mm,
and some vitamins. Yeah. So
mm,
and
mm,
also beans cause a lot of the bloating and gas that
mm-hmm.
people love so much. So we see that a lot after the fast.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
lots of gas. But,
yeah,
that's something to consider.
yeah,
Kiwi is a beautiful fruit as well.
yeah, yeah. I've heard that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, thank you so
wow.
much. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot to
Thank you.
Yeah,
think
thank you
about.
so much. So many insights and pieces of wisdom that I think can help us all feel a little bit more comfortable when we approach our gut mind health. And we would love to hear from y'all who are tuning in about how what was so exciting for you, what was most surprising for you about what Jonathan shared with us, and what is something you want to incorporate. Do you want to try that challenge that Marianne mentioned? Is it just like simply making sure that you don't take all of the tests so you're not freaking out unnecessarily? We would
Hmm.
love to hear from you. You can contact us on Instagram. We're at Connected Wellness Podcast. Marianne is on Instagram at Wabasaba. I'm on Instagram at Rue with Rachel Ann. And that reminds me, Jonathan, if there are people have questions or if they want to reach out to you, is there ways that they can do that?
Sure. Yeah. Probably best way to do that is my Twitter or X, I guess
Mhm.
whatever profile you want to call it now, at Jonathan Ragheb. Um, Happy to answer questions there.
Sounds good. Yeah. So if you have questions for Jonathan specifically, hit him up on X. We're also on Facebook at Connected Wellness Podcast. If you have any questions for Jonathan, but you don't have X, you can hit us up and we will, relay your question onto Jonathan. And so whatever way we can support you, we want to do that. And we'll also include those links below that Jonathan mentioned to really help us on our gut mind journey. So thank you so much, Jonathan, for being here, for sacrificing some of your post honeymoon time with us. It has been really, really exciting to hear all of the things that you have to share and very helpful on our journeys. And I'll pass it over to Marianne for our conclusion of the episode.
Thanks again, Jonathan, for being here. It's been great having you.
My
And
pleasure.
until next time, everybody, be well.
So be well, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.